Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Well, good morning, America, and good night or good evening to people living in Australia or anywhere else in the world. And the reason why I mention Australia is because Guineith Isaacs is going to be on with me today. And Guineith, I am checking to see if you made it. Are you there?
I'm here.
Awesome. Well, this is Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli, folks. He's still catching up on farming activity before winter hits. And Guineith is always a very diligent patriot, waking up in the middle of the night in Australia. Now, Guineith, what is it, about 2 a.m. where you are? Is that about right?
It's about 1 a.m.
Okay. So what do you do? Do you wake up for this show, or do you stay up until 1?
No, I wake up. I usually try and get a little bit of sleep before before the show, an hour or two, and then I have my alarm set, probably about 10 or 15 minutes beforehand, and so I wake up and sort of wipe the sleep out of my eyes and all that, and maybe grab a cup of tea or something. I didn't manage that this morning, but yeah, and just sort of sit here and wait for the phone to ring.
Wow. Well, we certainly appreciate you being a patriot from a different country and having the foresight and doing the reading and research to seeing what's going on with the corruption behind the scenes. Do you know what's going on with the Biden family right now, by the way, Guineith?
Oh, my gosh. The Biden laptop, they are absolutely doing the best they can to bury that about 100 feet deep below the soil. They are absolutely freaking out about what's on that laptop. It's not. It's not. That laptop is absolutely pure gold for everybody who wants to know what's really going on. Okay? Apparently, it's absolutely chock-a-block. That's a saying we have here in Australia. It means it's absolutely full of child pornography, children getting tortured. You know, it's just basically, you name it, it's on there.
It's really incredible.
The incompetence of these people is mind-blowing. Hunter Biden sent the laptop to a repair shop in Delaware and then didn't want to pick it up again. You've got to be kidding me. It's not like...
Hey, I got to throw something at you, okay? Are you ready? The Russians did it. The Russians did it, Guineith. It was Russia. So let me ask you this, Guineith. With the friends and acquaintances and the people you meet in town, out in the bush, what percentage of people, in your opinion, in Australia are aware of the corrupt shenanigans going on with the Democrat Party?
In America, I don't think very many of them are. Here in Victoria, I think that everybody universally recognizes that our local left-wing communist dictators are completely corrupt. I think everybody realizes that. but they seem to enjoy their slavery, is the thing. They may not be happy in it, but they're not particularly into throwing it off either, which is really, really tragic, because these people have a genocide in store. And, I know that because I know their playbook, which is one thing that we were going to discuss today. The other thing is, there's a movie project. I think I emailed you earlier. Would it be okay if I plug that movie project?
Absolutely. In fact, I've got some notes here about the Jones plantation and about the woman that was living out in rural areas, building huts, living off the land, having goats and gardens, and lives off of firewood. I want to talk about anything to do with self-sufficiency and brainwashing philosophy of the day. But before we go there, Gwyneth, let me mention 5 new articles that came out regarding the Biden scandals just in the last 12 hours. And that is Rudy Giuliani, it's just breaking. Hunter Biden criminal evidence handed over to the Delaware State Police, as you mentioned. Pictures of underage girls and very sensitive text messaging. Hunter Biden was on payroll. You're going to love this one. Hunter Biden was on payroll of credit card company that benefited from the 2005 bill pushed by his daddy. And you're going to love this one even more. Without evidence, the Bidens claim there's no corruption in leaked emails. And then basically Clapper, Brennan, and Romney comes out and claims there's no basis for Hunter Biden's accusations. And I believe Romney, he's a rhino, neocon, traitor senator out of Utah. He basically says these things because I think his son is also involved in working for energy companies abroad and getting paid for it and having a similar job what Hunter Biden does. And last but not least, Hunter Biden witness moved from prison cell after exposing influence peddling operation. And what this means is this guy who worked with Hunter Biden, basically he started singing like a bird, and they moved him from his prison cell because they're afraid of the FBI, the CIA, or the DOJ Epsteining him. So this is the newest revelations in the Biden scandals here in America, and it's almost surreal. I don't think a Twilight Zone writer could ever come up with the things that's happening today. So that being said, do you have any comments about those articles, Gwyneth?
It sounds like they're panicking. That's the thought that immediately strikes me. These are rats panicking because they realize that the Titanic isn't just going down. It's at that point where it's at almost directly upright, and the back half of it is about to break off and smash into smithereens in the water. I think they realize that they're at that point, which means that their demise is imminent. They are rats that have not left the sinking ship, and they know that their political end is near, and that they're panicking. That's what immediately strikes me, and it doesn't matter if they are rhinos or if they are Democrats or what color shirt they wear. They know that everybody now sees them for who they are. And it's only the most blind, it's only the most ignorant sheep that do not see them for who they are. And unfortunately, there's a great many of them around, but we're at the point where Joe Biden has a political rally and publicizes it through every mainstream venue that you can possibly imagine, and he gets 10 people showing up.
right. That's right. And President Trump, tens of thousands.
But Biden hires the local basketball stadium, and he gets 10 people show up for a political rally that has been shoved down everybody's throat locally for a whole week. Nobody likes him. Nobody wants anything to do with him. You know?
If this was a legitimate voting situation, Gwyneth, President Trump would win hands down. But this is some of the crap that they're pulling. For example, Florida postal employee charged with stealing mail-in ballots. Another article here: Democrats hyper-focused on winning Pennsylvania. That's because the Supreme Court just ruled that they can go several days now with mail-in ballots coming in so they could fix and rig the whole vote. And, of course, big tech is doing their part. Facebook whistleblower exposed, quote-unquote, hate speech engineering group staffed with Chinese nationals. And this is from the New York Post. So basically what they're doing is they're censoring, they're surveilling, they're purging, they're shadow banning, anything to do with truth. It's now, when you disclose truth, now you're a threat to the corrupt state. And it's proof that democracy's dead and we're entering a tyrannical, totalitarian, communist regime. And I think trust in the system, I discussed this with Vincent yesterday, I think trust in the system, Gwyneth, is totally gone. Whether it be medical trust, scientific trust, economic trust, anything to do with money, currency, value trust, the court system, the rule of law, that's totally toast. I mean, what do you think about what I just said there?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I really do. It's sort of like people would have to be in a zombified trance of being just about walking dead man and walking dead woman to actually believe what that little box in the corner says, you know. Like I said, unfortunately, there are a lot of them walking around. But, you know, there's so many people now who are wide awake and wide aware of what's going on. It's just amazing, you know, to see compared to a few years ago, because I've been doing this sort of activism work for many, many, many years. I mean, 20 years ago, my husband and I were fighting the child protection people just so that, you know, I would get the chance to be my child's mother, because they began attacking me when I was 3 months pregnant with my first child. How's that? Now, the only thing that I can think of is that, you know, I donated blood a year or two before then, and that they managed to get a hold of my blood type, which clearly would show that I am a British blue blood, and that they were very, very interested in getting a hold of any child.
Hold that thought. We're going into our first break. We'll be right back with Gwyneth Isaacs, folks. Well, welcome back to the show, folks. This is Rich Scheben from Montana, sitting in for Vincent Finelli today while he's catching up on some farming. And as usual, on Wednesday, USAPrepares.com has Gwyneth Isaacs live from Australia. Now, Gwyneth, before the break, did you want to finish your last thought, or did you just want to plug that documentary about the Jones plantation that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, I would like to talk about the Jones plantation.
Please.
Yeah. It's a project that's being put out by somebody by the name of Larkin Rose, okay, who came out with this parable a few years ago about a cotton plantation and a bunch of slaves and the slave owner and how things went down with him. Now, this you know, he made a short cartoon, like a 10-minute sort of cartoon of this, you know, of this story. And, you know, this particular Hollywood director saw his little 10-minute hand-drawn cartoon and said to himself, wow, that would make an amazing movie. And I don't have any work because of the coronavirus. He didn't have any work. And he said this would make a really, really great story, because what it is it's the story of all of us, that we are all on the plantation, and that it's really, you know, that we have Mr. Jones, not talking about Alex. This is a hypothetical plantation owner, nothing to do with any radio hosts, okay? But one of the guys is called Mr. Jones and the other guy is called Mr. Johnson, and there's this guy in the background pulling all the strings. I'm not going to give away too many spoilers, but I really, really believe in this project. It's going to be a movie that will change the world, because everybody says these days about getting red-pilled. And the reason why we say getting red-pilled is because of a movie called The Matrix, which was put together by the Wachowski brothers, more or less on their own. And, you know, and that introduced so many ideas into our culture that we now totally understand by just saying, listen, mate, I'm red-pilled. And everybody knows what you're talking about. This movie will be of the magnitude of a movie like The Matrix, or of, what's another one? Avatar is another one that, you know, if you talk about that and the ideas and the concepts that are in Avatar, everybody now understands them because this film got made about it. Well, this is going to be like that, except it's going to be in the realm of, for a few years we're ruled by Mr. Jones, and then for a few years we're ruled by Mr. Johnson, and then we go back to being ruled by Mr. Jones. And if you want to know more about the project, I myself, I'm not saying this to blow my own horn. I've given money to this project, but they have not paid me anything to say this. I gave money to it. I hardly give money to anything these days. But I gave money to help fund this project. Not a huge amount of money, but, you know, enough to, you know, to really mean something to me. And for me to do that is really, really significant. And the only reason I'm saying that I've given money to it is to encourage other people to go to Indiegogo.com and just search in their search bar. That's INDIEGOGO, Indiegogo.com. And, you know, if you go in their search bar at their webpage and type in Jones Plantation, you'll find that it's the first result, and it's a little purple poster or thumbnail, and click on it. You'll find out all about it. And, yeah, support this. This is going to be something that will change the world.
Okay, Gwyneth. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. We'll be back after the break, folks, with Gwyneth Isaacs from Australia. Welcome back to USAPrepares.com, everybody. This is Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli this morning. And our guest, as usual on Wednesdays, is Gwyneth Isaacs, live from Australia. Now, Gwyneth, one profound statement I gleaned from you regarding this implied metaphor perception about this documentary, The Jones Plantation. You mentioned how you're either controlled by Mr. Jones or Mr. Smith, and I want you to think about, you know, things that I often say on the air. Practice what you preach laws, the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody. But see, the elite don't want that. They create these templates and blueprints and playbooks and flow charts for the destruction of us. So they continue. We allow the aristocracy to be emboldened because people don't stand up for themselves. And we're letting us be divided with race baiting, gender baiting, sex baiting, religion baiting, ideology baiting, generation baiting. And their job is to manufacture perception, pity, guilt, and ideology, sway public opinions using the 5 companies that control all the mainstream media. They sell these narratives and talking points to us so they can make certain people believe that they are victims based on what group they're in. And they use things, all the subsets under political correctness, especially group identity politics. And they use media propaganda, subliminal messaging, professional wordsmithing, Hegelian dialectic. And they literally insult, degrade, and disrespect all these groups, which never turns out to empower them or empower the nation. It just brings everybody down, makes people more submissive, breaks their will, and increases all the subsets of despair, if you will. And you never make anybody better, whether it be an individual, a group, or a country, by rewarding mediocrity and limiting opportunity based on that particular group, like you mentioned, Red Pill. So, that being said, do you feel that the metaphor and message behind this particular movie is enough to wake up the sleeping masses for the good and not the propaganda? And I got to remind you that in 2012, Barack Obama passed a bill to allow propaganda against the American people. Congress passed it, and everything that happens is not the fault of anybody, especially the elites. It's Russia. Russia did it. So, your comment, Gwyneth.
Well, my comment is that if you look into the history of who Larkin Rose is and what he's done in the past, you will see a guy who has really been a thorn in the side of the machine for many, 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 many years. You know, for about the last 20 years, he's been doing various projects to really, as Frank Zappa would have said, Frank Zappa said that the lie will only be, I'm not sure of the exact quote, but he said that this illusion of normalcy will only be convenient for as long as it's convenient, and then one day they'll put all the chairs away and pull the curtains back and we'll see the brick wall at the back of the theatre. That's what Frank Zappa said. That's another way of saying that it's all a farce. Everything you see out there is a farce. And the intention that Larkin Rose has in this movie, it's actually a work of fiction that is written. It's a parable to tell a message that people are really going to remember. And I don't want to give away too many spoilers. So if people want to find out more about the project, they should go to Indiegogo.com and search for Jones Plantation, and they will find out he's got videos there on his fundraising site at Indiegogo, which will tell a lot more about the project that I'm able to on air. But this is it. It's about people beginning to see how things really are and how they have been played. We've all been played for such a bunch of schmucks for all these years. And, you know, as soon as people realize how these evil people have been playing them like a piano, you know, that it's sort of like they'll sit back and they'll go, hang on. I'm not sure I want to keep doing that anymore. I'm not sure I want to be sucked in anymore to have these people take everything from me. You know, this is it. You've got to, this is what this whole movie is. It's going to be a full-length feature film. Okay, it's not going to be a documentary as such, except that it's in the same manner that we speak about documentaries, more or less of like, you know, where I said the other day there's a documentary called Harry's Game. If you look up Harry's Game on YouTube, you won't see a documentary as people normally understand a documentary. You'll see a movie that somebody made off of a book that somebody wrote. And but it tells a lot of truths about how things actually go down in the real world. And, you know, this is it. But like I say, this is a project that needs to be supported. It's getting no funding from the Hollywood system. Larkin Rose is basically funding this. He's setting up the funding mechanisms himself. He has a large following, and it's called the voluntarist anarcho-capitalist community. Anarcho-capitalist is not the same as Antifa or BLM. In fact, it's the polar opposite of them. They believe that you ought to be left alone to live your life, and if anybody is hurt by you, then you need to suffer consequences. So it's what you and I have been saying for a very long time. It's just using different words. So they believe you shouldn't have any police. They believe that you shouldn't have any military. They believe that you should live your life and not hurt anyone and make money if you can. And, you know, and if you live your life as best you can, if you want to make money, you can go and make money and have a business. If you don't want to, oh well, just live off the land or whatever. That is called anarcho-capitalism or voluntarism, meaning that you should only interact with the systems that you want to interact with, meaning that you should not be compelled to do anything by anyone against your will, because that's called slavery. And that's it in a nutshell. That's what you and I and Vincent and everybody just about at USA Prepares has been talking about for many, many years. And it turns out we're not alone. And I found out about anarcho-capitalism, and I said, hey, hang on, that's me. That's Vincent, that's Rich Scheben, that's all of us. But we came at it from a different angle, and we didn't necessarily call ourselves anarcho-capitalists or voluntarists, but it turns out that there's a whole system of philosophy and thought out there that is exactly what we've been saying all along anyway. Does that make sense, Rich?
Well, sure it does, but I can also see different degrees of conversation and communication that needs to take place. Let me just comment on some of the things you said, okay? Like, for example, the left wants to defund the police. Well, right now, Minnesota residents are suing the city over lack of police patrols because crime is skyrocketing. And I know you're a huge history buff, so you know about the brown shirts and the black shirts and the red guard. And this has happened many times across history. When you get rid of the present police, you bring in people who don't care about other people. You bring in the worst of the worst, people who are sociopaths, psychopaths, who have no problem killing people on the spot. And they care more about manufacturing the perception of their own self-importance and self-preservation, and then personal survival of the people gets compromised because the people behind the power don't care about the country. I'm all for live and let live. All for it.
have. They have never, ever cared about the welfare of the people. That we are to them cattle. And my ancestors were running the show. My ancestors were globalist banksters, and the other branches of my family to this day, I'm talking about our branch of the family broke off from the main branch of the family 5 generations ago. But the main trunk of the family is still globalist banksters. They still regard the rest of us as being cattle. They don't want to know us because we decided that we weren't going to play ball with them. Now, the voluntarist anarcho-capitalist response would be people need to look after themselves. We are facing a civil war, and there is no getting away from it now, as far as I can tell. It's going to come down to the wire, and people need to be armed. We're not promoting violence, but we are promoting the defense of self and life and property, so that when somebody comes to bust your door down at 3 a.m., no matter what uniform they are or are not wearing, then they're going to find you, and they're going to find that you are prepared. Now, because people have been enslaved for so long, they have relied on the police for so long to protect them from they don't have that mindset. And they are going to be victims, and they are going to be prey when the police go away, because they have not got the mindset of looking after themselves like our ancestors had. And that's a problem. But they were always going to be a prey anyway. And I want them to wake up, and I want them to begin to defend themselves.
Well, Gwyneth, on that note, and that's very well said, we will be back after the break, folks, with Gwyneth Isaacs, live from Australia. Welcome back to USAPrepares.com. Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli, and I am talking with Gwyneth Isaacs from Australia, live. Now, speaking of Australia, you were mentioning about how we're being played, Gwyneth, and just a little sidebar here. I know Australia are big ABBA fans. If I tell ABBA I play the air guitar, you think they can give me a shot?
I don't know. But yeah, there are a lot of ABBA fans here in Australia.
I knew that. I saw the documentary on that years ago. Anyway, we don't have trust in the system. Okay, it's totally gone.
Yeah.
And I think, from the central bank corrupt monetary policies, I mean, here Joe Biden literally used billions of American dollars for this Ukraine payoff of U.S. taxpayer dollars to stop investigations on his own son. But when President Trump inquired about it, the Democrats were saying he should be impeached. At the same time, while Obama was spying and running coups and shadowing him around the world, committing treason and sedition. And here they spend hundreds of millions of dollars on this Mueller trial. You can't make this stuff up that the taxpayers are paying for. It's unbelievable what's going on at the elite aristocracy level, just like these Hollywood actors. They're saying how the little people need to pay for people's college, pay off these young people's college debts when they have huge over-leveraged loans where 90% of the degrees are worthless. But the wealthy folks go in there and bribe the universities with all this malinvestment that the poorer people are paying for. And these celebrities go in there and bribe universities for their kids with scholarships, bribe for higher test scores, bribe for higher degrees. Everything is bought and paid for. So I think the system, when you literally have a system where they try to impeach President Trump for what Joe Biden did, starting a coup, blocking the airways for what Hillary did with the emails, never mind the fact that it's been declassified, that she paid and made up all this Russia stuff, and the DNC and her paid for it using taxpayer dollars, and the FBI and the DOJ and the CIA literally help them out, and it shows in emails that Joe Biden gets a 50% cut of the profit. While Hunter Biden is not just doing pedophilia, but literally abusing, physically torturing young girls. And we have this all phony Russiagate. Hillary Clinton walks. General Flynn, they got no evidence on him, but they still won't release him. Everything, like you said, is a hoax. Everything is fake. Everything is phony. I mean, Gina Haspel from the CIA is blocking release of declassifications. This Whitmer kidnapping fiasco, the FBI was involved in that. I mean, we literally have the highest levels, treason, sedition, espionage, and no one's going to jail. Nothing matters. And all this Russia, they were supposedly influencing our elections, but illegals from any country can vote with no voter ID laws. You can't make up this kind of stupid, Gwyneth. I mean, when hypocrisy and double standards and lies and propaganda and hoaxes and gaslighting is like an every minute occurrence, I'm certainly a proponent of self-sufficiency because that's all we have left. The whole system is fake, it's phony, it's corrupt. And this is why during the second hour I'll be interested to hear what you have to say regarding that one documentary about that woman building huts and living off the land, and milking goats and gardening and using firewood for heat, because that's how we live. But I'm very interested in going there for the next hour. If you want to start with that in the last couple of closing minutes before the end of the first hour, you can certainly set the table for that.
Yeah, I would love to do that because I think that so often in this show, it is important that people see the politics side of things and how the world really is, okay? And it helps for people to understand that fighting these sorts of battles has made us who we are. So like I say, with myself, fighting pedophile cartels, corrupt police, child protective services, etc., for over 20 years. Well, it would be about 20 years now, okay, just getting on to 20 years. That made me lose faith in the system a long time ago, and I realized that I would have to just have my own farm, look after my own family, because sooner or later, the whole thing, the coprola, was going to hit the propeller on such a massive level that...
We'll be right back, folks. Gwyneth Isaac. Welcome back to Hour 2, folks. This is Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli, and I am with Gwyneth Isaacs, live from Australia. And Gwyneth, a new article on Zero Hedge at this moment. Basically, I'll just give a quick rundown. In fact, I'll just read a couple sentences, and it'll probably say it all. The new emails magnify concerns that Hunter Biden was involved in a pay-to-play scheme. The emails appear to refer to Joe Biden receiving money and certainly refer to influence peddling. Now, can you imagine if Donald Trump or any of his children did 1/1,000,000th of these behaviors? Now, Gwyneth, do you feel that the little people around the world are really rooting for Trump because they're so sick of the corruption, the manipulation, they're so sick of the divide and conquer strategies, controversial, racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, conspiracy theorist, intolerant, violent, hater, anti-ism is phobe, anti-ism is phobe, anti-ism is phobe. I think people can see now that this is a code for the aristocracy, not just dividing us, but covering up crimes. And I think they're rooting for America and Donald Trump because they want to taste freedom. They want to taste liberty, the rule of law. They want to taste sovereignty. They want to be judged by hard work, effort, proven results, and qualifications. They don't want to be rewarded for mediocrity. They want opportunity. They don't want to be submissive. They don't want to be insulted, degraded, and disrespected because of what group they're in. They're tired of the media propaganda, the professional wordsmithing, the hoaxes. Do you feel that's an accurate statement?
Well, what I think is that they think that Donald Trump is the last hope for the system to show that it's got at least a little bit of worth. Now, personally, I personally don't think that Donald Trump is as evil as Joe Biden, but I would like to know why he didn't arrest Hillary on the very night that he won the election 4 years ago, like he said he was going to. And instead, he called her a very fine lady and a very dear friend. And this is, I think, the curtain getting pulled back. I think that the country, I think that if Hillary had been voted in 4 years ago instead of Donald Trump, then the people really would have faced a world of hurt. But I think that it's probably just delayed it, and it hasn't done away with it altogether, and that Donald Trump didn't clean house. All we've heard over the last 4 years has been excuses, excuses, and more excuses. He installed a lot of deep staters in positions that they shouldn't have been ever allowed 100 miles near those positions. And he put them in there. People like, for instance, Mueller and Steve Bannon and people like this. Why did he do that? He knew that they were going to be traitors, and they were traitors. You know, this was it. Like Frank Zappa said, it's about the curtain getting pulled back at the back of the theatre, and everybody's seeing that there's nothing there but a brick wall. You know, it's all just stage props. That's what it is. It's sort of like, you know, the same, I think that there needs to be the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody. And if we did even a tiny fraction of what they've been doing, that'd probably execute us. That's the truth of it. You know, what if any one of us had been found with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of images of child pornography, children getting tortured, children having their throats cut, you know, and then, you know, people drinking their blood and all the rest of it, which apparently that's what's at the bottom of this rat hole, okay? This is it. If we'd done 1/1000th of what they'd done, we would never be allowed to see the light of day again. And that's the simple truth of it. You know, these people have been allowed to get away with what they've gotten away with for far too long. They've never faced any pushback whatsoever. They've never been challenged. Everybody's always said, well, we can change things in 4 years' time at the ballot box. When all it is you've got Mr. Jones over there and Mr. Johnson over there. You have a little while with Mr. Johnson, a little while with Mr. Jones, and then it goes back to Mr. Johnson, back to Mr. Jones. And I think that now, for anyone with two eyes in their head, it is glaringly obvious that it's all a farce. And that's how it is. And what the only way for people to live their lives into the future is going to be for them just to look after themselves and their own family and their own kin around them. That's how it used to be hundreds and hundreds of years ago. People would not move in their whole lives more than 5 miles away from the place where they had been born. There were no hospitals. There might have been hospitals, but they weren't places that anyone would want to be. There was no police. Everybody had firearms. Everybody carried firearms and swords with them. If you had any money whatsoever, the first thing you would do is you would buy a sword, you would buy some pistols, and you would buy a horse. And that was so that you had mobility and that you had the ability to defend yourself. And any gentleman of any means whatsoever, unless you were the poorest of the poorest of the poor, you would go out in the morning, and part of your getting dressed routine would be you would strap on your flintlock pistols and you would strap on your sword. And many men would also carry daggers in their boots as well, depending on what part of the world they were in and the culture. But in many parts of the world, daggers either up the sleeves or in the boots were completely normal to wear, or in the socks were completely normal for men to wear them. And that is in case you had a problem, in case you met a highwayman down the road, you know, in case your lady was in need of defense. Men have gotten away from the idea of defending their woman, you know, and because of that, women have had to fend for themselves. And then men complain that their woman, you know, that they're not like they used to be. You know, there's practically no such thing as a good housekeeper anymore. Nobody does that. It's like this. But what we need to do, in many areas, it's actually illegal to carry daggers. In most areas, it would be, if you walk down the street with a couple of flintlock pistols and a dagger strapped to your belt, you would probably get arrested in most areas, you know, except maybe Texas. Certainly you would get a lot of strange looks, but once upon a time that was perfectly normal because there were no police and everybody knew how to duel, everybody knew how to sword fight, everybody knew how to shoot a pistol. And yes, there were still robberies, but you would get what in America you would call a posse. If there were any bad outlaws, you would get a posse raised. In England, they were called a hue and cry. It's much the same thing. A group of locals would get together and they would figure out where this outlaw was hanging out and they would hunt him down. And they would go get him. You know, this is it. And in America, they might do such things as get some, and in England as well, they might do such things as get some bloodhounds onto the latest robbery scene, for example. And those bloodhounds, I read a story of a pack of bloodhounds that managed to trade a scent that was 370 hours old, 2 weeks old. And these bloodhounds were able to find some hikers, it was in this case, who had been missing for 2 weeks. This is what people used to do 200 years ago, 300 years ago. Yes, there were police.
Gwyneth, let me just chime in on a couple things you just said, you know, regarding the theater, the lack of arrest and indictments of Hillary and Biden's and all these people. You know, when Jeff Sessions was the AG before Barr. What I said yesterday on the air, I basically said that I was very upset when Trump called Barr a nice guy. Basically, people at this point in history don't want somebody who's a nice guy, someone who could be pushed around, people who could be bribed, people who can be blackmailed, because that's what is happening at the top. All these people have handcuffs on because they're bribed or blackmailed. the people want rule of law. They want arrests. They want indictments. And that's why I commented on the lack of whistleblowers and the poor morale in the FBI, the DOJ, and the CIA. I mean, most people, when I read the comment section with some of the behaviors that they're doing by not creating arrests and indictments, I mean, it's people, if any of these agencies came to people's house right now, they'd lock the door and run and pull out a gun because they don't trust these people. They're so bought and paid for. They're literally a mafia arm of the totalitarian, tyrannical, communist insurrection conquest that is happening right now. They're all bought and paid for, and they're helping Facebook, Google, and Twitter in election rigging. You know, Barr just created this phony illusion that he's going to go after Google yesterday. Heck, this could take years in court, because our judges and our lawyers are bought and paid for. Again, they're either bribed or they're blackmailed. There's no legitimacy in the system. And I totally agree with what you're talking about on how we need to go back to the land and live a more simple life and be more self-sufficient, relearn those old 19th century skill sets. You were talking about, you know, this lady. You sent me an article and a video on this lady who was building huts and living off the land. Let's talk about her and her lifestyle when we get back after the break. Welcome back, everybody. Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli, and I am talking with Guineith Isaacs from Australia live. Now, Guineith, you know, when you see where the agenda goes and how abnormal is now normal, you know, we see 70% of people basically with less than $1,000 in the bank, 80% living paycheck to paycheck. We see rigged CPI inflation so that the people on Social Security, the recipients of it, don't get their cost of living going up because everything is fake. We see the central banks basically money shuffling and creating creative accounting for non-productive, non-earning situations. We see welfare for the rich, money being printed out of thin air to bail out the too big to fail and the too big to jail. We see a combination of inflation and mostly deflation and stagflation for the little people, where the price and cost of necessities and cost shifting for the little people is going up. And we see propaganda. We see absolute unsustainable future rates of growth because of this headwinds. Now, with all the rigging that's going on and all the speculation and the hedging and the political correctness, like group identity politics, we see robotics, automation, artificial intelligence, and the technocracy literally taking over the jobs, taking over opportunities, and we see the funneling of money going to the elite from the little people. So, as we always say here on USA Prepares, we have to start thinking outside the box and living outside the box, because work and opportunity is no longer legitimate in this country. So, what do we do regarding, like this woman that you sent me a video on and some info? You know, she's building huts on land and raising animals and using wood for heat. Let's go ahead and talk about her lifestyle, which is very synonymous to your lifestyle and my lifestyle, on trying to combat all this lack of opportunity and legitimacy in the system. Guineith?
Okay, there is a YouTube channel. It's called Living Big in a Tiny House, and he has a lot of these type of people on his YouTube channel. He's a New Zealander. Now, there's this one lady that he, did a little half-hour documentary on. I think it was about 20 minutes or half an hour that he spoke with this lady, and seeing her land, and she had some land in Wales, in Britain. And she basically built her own little house on this land, and the house cost her $1,000 to build. And I suspect that $1,000 went into a gigantic sheet of thick vulcanized rubber that she put as a waterproof membrane on her roof so that the rain would stay out of her roof. And this is a type of waterproof membrane that farmers buy to put in the bottom of their dams so that their dams will hold water. And she bought a big sheet of it and she put it on her roof. But then she put wads of grass, of turf, on top of the roof, and she made herself a house. And this house completely blends into the forest. You wouldn't even know it was there until you were right on top of it. But you go inside and it's the most beautiful, elegant little house that you could possibly imagine. And she's a grandma. I don't know what happened to her partner, but he wasn't in the picture apparently. He may have died or he may have left. I don't know. It didn't say that. And but yeah, she said that she had her children and her grandchildren over to visit, and the children thought it was great. And the thing is, when you're living this lifestyle, you go back to living with nature, and your place ends up looking absolutely amazing. And people come and they see the fruit trees everywhere, and they see the gardens, and they see the productivity, and they see the chickens and ducks and goats and whatever, and they say, wow, you've got the most amazing life here. But the thing is... Hold
on to that thought. We'll be right back. Welcome back, folks. Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli, and I'm with Guineith Isaacs live from Australia. And I had to laugh. Thank God I had my phone on mute, Guineith, because when the left said that Trump was desperate, as per the last commercial, so they have to basically platform him. They have to shadow ban him. They have to edit and purge him. They have to basically try everything possible to destroy their economy per their admission. They're using computer algorithms. They're censoring him. They're surveilling all of us. And they want to centralize everything. No one's showing up at the Biden's rallies. Like you said earlier in the show, like they're getting like 10 people in their stupid circles, while Trump is getting tens of thousands of people. Trump doing most of what he said he was going to do. Trump's working his butt off despite all the deep state corruption in the White House, in the Senate, in Congress, in the FBI, in the DOJ, in big tech. If Trump was so desperate, why are all these so-called big corporations and big government paid for by us economically and socially and biologically and chemically and engineering everything? If we're so desperate, why are they the ones creating the psyops behind the scenes? It's unbelievable what's going on today. You know, Trump is an imperfect sinner, as we all are, Guineith, but I really believe that he's putting his family and his life on the line to do what's right, to do the best thing for the American people. I really do believe that. And even if you label it as the worst of two evils, I think he's done things that most presidents and most people in Congress will never do. He's working his butt off, going from rally to rally, town to city to airport hangar he is working his butt off. And I think the reason why we haven't seen these arrests, like you mentioned, and we have all this theater, is because all these people, the DOJ, the FBI, the CIA, all these examples we've given over the past several months with published articles in the public domain, all the scandals, all the pay-to-play, and some of them, a lot of these Republicans are either bribed or blackmailed as well. I mean, how can they allow, on Twitter, for example, child porn and Chinese government sites and propaganda, but they don't even allow the president? I mean, these town hall meetings that they have, you talk about theater. This is all run by the mainstream media, and Joe Biden and all his corrupt dealings with America's geopolitical enemies, and they get away with it. And it's almost like putting a hot lamp and tying President Trump into a chair. It really is all theater, because it shows that the powers that be have to maintain control. They have an addiction to power, money, and control. And I think that's why we have to resort to being a little more self-sufficient. We have to think about food, water, shelter, and energy, and try to make those things ourselves, because nothing matters anymore. We have phony benevolence, phony earnings, phony philanthropy, phony economy, phony currency, phony nobility, phony equality and fairness and tolerance and diversity and diplomacy. I mean, everything is fake, like we talked about earlier in the show. So that being said, Gwyneth, go back to what this lady does in New Zealand and how she lives, which is very similar to how we live. And please glean some tips from her that you could say publicly that might benefit the people. And when you were mentioning her house, she does make some sacrifices. I mean, it's a very small house. Do you remember the square footage of that place?
Yeah, I do. But you know something? What I wanted to get into was in living an indigenous tribal type life. And if you look at most indigenous tribal houses, they're not big houses. I grew up in Rotorua in New Zealand, and when I was a very little girl, at the local Maori village, which was down the road, there were some traditional tribal houses there that were owned by some very, very, very old people. I'm talking about people that were 90 and 100 years old, and this was back in the 1980s. And so they would have been born in the late part of the 19th century. And these traditional Maori whare houses, they would be maybe 50 square feet, which is tiny. You know, that really is really, really tiny. And yet that's where they lived. That's the area that they lived in. And you might have a husband and a wife and children in this house, and how they did it was they lived outside and they went into the house when it rained. Okay? They conducted their lives outside. They went and they would hunt, and they would grow vegetables, and they would, after the white man came, the white man brought trout to New Zealand. There weren't any large fish in the rivers in New Zealand before the white man came. There were tiny fish that were maybe an inch or two long, but there were no large fish. And then the white man came, and he brought trout with him from America and also from England. There's rainbow trout, and there's also brown trout, and there's tiger trout in New Zealand's rivers now, but there weren't any of those before the white man came. So they weren't really so much, in the inland waters, they weren't so much into fishing, except that they would go crayfishing. You know, they would get freshwater crayfish. They lived their lives outside, but it meant that they were very hardy, they were very fit, muscular, active people. They weren't like us that spend a large proportion of our day, even the best of us. I spend rather a lot of time sitting down, because I do things like I read, I research, and I email, and I do still a little bit post on social media. I don't have Facebook anymore, but I do things like I comment on YouTube videos that I think need pertinent comments and on other video platforms as well, like Library. Like I don't go on BitChute, but yeah, there are other platforms out there. But this is how people used to live. They used to live outside. And because they used to live outside, they didn't need a big house. And I can tell you, I live in a house that is maybe 100 square metres. That would be about 900 square feet. So it's not a huge house. But now there's just me and my son, and he's basically said that when he turns 18, he wants to move out. He wants his own life. And I say, well, that's fair enough. Off you go. 900 square feet. I'm thinking of myself living in this 900-foot square house on my own. And I'm thinking, gosh, I think I'll just have to go up in the back of the forest somewhere on my land, and I'll just have to build a little tribal house. Live in that, because the idea of me living in this, and I mean, like I say, a lot of people might not think that 900 square feet is a big house, but I think it's a huge house because I spend so much of my life living outside, and a big house needs more cleaning. You know, a small house needs less cleaning. That's it. And, you know, I would rather be out training my horses, digging my garden, planting trees, and looking after my dogs. I would rather dig a ditch up in the back so that water infiltrates into the soil with my spade than clean my house. You know, because, you know, you clean the house and then, you know, you go away and it's just sort of like, it gets messy. And then you got to clean it again and it gets messy again. You got to clean it again. That's why people in Indigenous tribal lifestyles, they have quite small houses. And that's the theme all over the world. They live outdoors and they come inside when it rains. Yeah, that's how it is. Now, me, myself, I'm not much of a goat keeper. I've given up on goats because, and, you know, I do astrology, and anyone who's an astrologer out there, I've got retrograde Saturn and Cancer. I'm not a goat keeper. I've figured that out. But, you know, that probably means nothing to you, Rich. But,
well, actually, I've got Nigerian dwarf goats, and we're going to be putting our buck in with the does here any day. And had Sonnens for a lot of years, those big white goats from Switzerland. Yeah. I was going to use them as a pack goat, and I never did. But speaking about this lifestyle and building a cabin and living off the land, what's happening in Australia? I hear Australia is really going full Nazi, full totalitarian. Sovereignty, liberty, freedom is a thing of the past there. So my question to you is there, like here in America, we have a mass exodus out of these blue Democrat cities. Mass. What is happening in Australia with what you're going through? Why are people, and if people aren't, I'm going to ask why, how come everybody, or 90% of people who are living under this tyranny, are not moving out to the country where you live and buy that 20 to 40 acres to live this lifestyle that you're talking about?
So many of them are. There is a real estate boom in country towns here in Victoria, and also for country farmland. It's selling out, you know. There's, you know, there's, I don't really know of any places around here that are for sale at the moment. It used to be that, like, you know, you'd drive down the road, or you'd ride down the road, and there'd be that place for sale there, that place for sale there, that, and they're all sold. None of them are for sale anymore. They've all sold.
Wow.
You know,
okay.
I can't any of them. So people are getting the message. People are moving out of the metropolises, and I would even advise at this stage against living in a country town. I would say get out into the countryside, get a rural area and get acres of land. Get as many acres of land as you can, but preferably between 20 and 40 acres. And
that's good advice, Gwyneth. We'll be back with Gwyneth Isaacs after this break. We appreciate you folks being here. Well, welcome back to USAPrepares.com, everybody. We're in our last segment of our second hour, and we are with a patriot who appreciates freedom, liberty, sovereignty, who's well-read, well-researched. And, Gwyneth, when I look at your writing skills, I wish I had 1/100th of them. And I want to say that I know Vince does, and I really appreciate, and I know our listeners do, your willingness to wake up in the middle of the night in Australia and speak on the air worldwide just to help other people on a voluntary basis. And I want to say thank you personally for doing that. I appreciate it, and once in a while I chime in when I'm not outside doing chores, because when you live off-grid and you raise animals and you hunt and fish for food and you have a garden. In fact, I just picked my last few peppers, carrots, kale, Swiss chard just yesterday because we have a cold front coming in. In fact, we have I'm still picking a couple tomatoes on the 21st of October, but that's going to end shortly because we have a major cold front coming in for a few days. So, yeah.
So you might have snow on the ground in the next little while then. Is that what that means?
Well, it's funny that you said that. We just got our first snow the other day. It melted, but we got a little dusting last night. Very, very sparse. But, yeah, winter's on its way. So, Gwyneth, regarding this last segment, how would you know? A lot of people are sitting here listening to you suggesting, which we do all the time at USAPrepares.com, to buy that 20 to 40 acres, to be self-sufficient, to possibly build your own home, have your own well, grow your own produce, your own fruits and vegetables, maybe raise meat, maybe a little hunting and fishing, maybe live with a solar array off-grid. What recommendations, when you have people, and not cynics, maybe people just don't have the capital resources to pull the trigger, what advice would you give them?
Well, a number of years ago, before I bought this place, I was living in a trailer park. And before I was living in the trailer park, I was homeless. And when I was, so actually moving into the trailer park was a step up. I had a house across the other side of the country that I sold to buy this farm. But we had to flee for our lives from that place for various reasons. It just wasn't safe for us to be there anymore, my boys and I. But when I was at the trailer park, I had vegetables growing in styrofoam vegetable boxes, broccoli boxes, around the outside of my trailer. And so you can, that was helping us at the time. And other people in the trailer park would say, wow, this is amazing. Look at what you're doing with this place. It's great. And, I even went to the people who own the trailer park and I said, do you know where there's any good soil that you would allow me to dig up that I could put into these broccoli boxes and, grow some vegetables? And they said, yeah, we get the oak leaves from the oak trees that were growing in this trailer park, and we dump them down in the river valley. We've been doing it for years. Probably the soil underneath those oak leaves is absolutely gorgeous. And I said, beauty, mate. And I headed down there with some, boxes or whatever. Maybe I might have borrowed a wheelbarrow from the people who own the trailer park. And I headed down there and I dug up the compost composted oak leaves, and I brought them up to my trailer, and I explained to the owners of the trailer park what I was going to do, and they said, yeah, sure, that'll look great. It'll look great if you go for it. Put the vegetables in the broccoli boxes around your trailer. And the other people in the trailer park, I was very fortunate. They were very respectful. They didn't steal the vegetables or anything like that. I know that you probably couldn't do that in every trailer park, but that's what I did in that circumstance. And before I moved into the trailer park, when it was my boys and I were living as homeless people for probably about, how long? About 2 months? I'm not quite sure, actually. It would have been about 2 months that we were homeless. We were living off the land. So we had a 1-ton van. It was a camper van.
Well, Glenn, we're coming to the end of the show. Music's coming on. I want to thank you for everything that you do for the little people. We really appreciate you. And keep up the good work. And we'll see what happens on November 3rd.
God bless, and you have a great week, won't you?
You too. Thank you, Gwyneth.
Okay, see you later.